Chapter 4. And this word, soul, remained with me to the end. Egypt was taking his soul away into the past. What was of value in him went willingly. The rest, some lesser aspect of his mind and character, resisted, holding to the present. A struggle, therefore, was involved, but this was being gradually obliterated too. How I arrived gaily at this monstrous conclusion seems to me now a mystery, but the truth is that from a conversation one brings away a general idea that is larger than the words actually heard and spoken. I have reported, naturally, but a fragment of what passed between us in language, and of what was suggested by gesture, expression, silence, merely perhaps a hint. I can only assert that this troubling verdict remained a conviction in my mind. It came upstairs with me. It watched and listened by my side. That mysterious third evoked in our conversation was bigger than either of us separately. It might be called the spirit of ancient Egypt, or it might be called, with equal generalization, the past. This third, at any rate, stood by me, whispering this astounding thing. I went out onto my little balcony to smoke a pipe and enjoy the comforting presence of the stars before turning in. It came out with me. It was everywhere. I heard the barking of dogs, the monotonous beating of a distant drum towards Bedraschien, the sing-song voices of the natives in their booths, and down the dim-lit streets. I was aware of this invisible third behind all these familiar sounds. The enormous night sky, drowned in stars, conveyed it too. It was in the breath of chilly wind that whispered round the walls, and it brooded everywhere above the sleepless desert. I was alone, as little as though George Isley stood beside me in person, and at that moment a moving figure caught my eye below. My window was on the 6th story, but there was no mistaking the tall and soldierly bearing of the man who was strolling past the hotel. George Isley was going slowly out into the desert. There was actually nothing unusual in the sight. It was only 10 o'clock. But for doctor's orders, I might have been doing the same myself. Yet, as I leaned over the dizzy ledge and watched him, a chill struck through me, and a feeling nothing could justify, nor pages of writing describe, rose up and mastered me. His words at dinner came back with curious force. Egypt lay round him, motionless, a vast grey web. His feet were caught in it. It quivered. The silvery meshes in the moonlight announced the fact from Memphis up to Thebes, across the Nile, from underground Saqqara to the Valley of the Kings. A tremor ran over the entire desert. And again, as in the dining room, the leagues of sand went rustling. It seemed to me that I caught him in the act of disappearing. I realized in that moment the haunting power of this mysterious, still atmosphere, which is Egypt, and some magical emanation of its mighty past broke over me suddenly like a wave. Perhaps in that moment I felt what he himself felt. The withdrawing suction of the huge, spent wave swept something out of me into the past with it. An indescribable yearning drew something living from my heart, something that longed with a kind of burning, searching sweetness for a glory of spiritual passion that was gone. The pain and happiness of it were more poignant than may be told, and my present personality, some vital portion of it at any rate, wilted before the power of its enticement. I stood there, motionless as stone, and stared. Erect and steady, knowing resistance vain, eager to go, yet striving to remain, and half with an air of floating off the ground, he went towards the pale grey thread which was the track to Suez and the far Red Sea. There came upon me this strange, deep sense of pity, pathos, sympathy, that was beyond all explanation, and mysterious as a pain in dreams. For a sense of his awful loneliness stole into me, a loneliness nothing on this earth could possibly relieve. Robbed of the present, he sought this chimera of his soul, an unreal past. Not even the calm majesty of this exquisite Egyptian night could soothe the dream away. The peace and silence were marvelous, the sweet perfume of the desert air intoxicating, but all these intensified it only. And though at a loss to explain my own emotion, its poignancy was so real that a sigh escaped me, and I felt that tears lay not too far away. I watched him, yet felt I had no right to watch. Softly I drew back from the window with the sensation of eavesdropping upon his privacy. But before I did so, I had seen his outline melt away into the dim world of sand that began at the very walls of the hotel. He wore a cloak of green that reached down almost to his heels, and its color blended with the silvery surface of the desert's dark sea tint. This sheen first draped and then concealed him. It covered him with a fold of its mysterious garment that, without seam or binding, veiled Egypt for 1,000 leagues. The desert took him. Egypt caught him in her web. He was gone. Sleep for me just then seemed out of the question. The change in him made me feel less sure of myself. To see him thus invertebrate shocked me. I was aware that I had nerves. For a long time I sat smoking by the window, my body wary, but my imagination irritatingly stimulated. The big sign lights of the hotel went out. Window after window closed below me. The electric standards in the streets were already extinguished. The Helouan looked like a child's white blocks scattered in ruin upon the nursery carpet. It seemed so wee upon the vast expanse. It lay in a twinkling pattern, like a cluster of glowworms dropped into a negligible crease of the tremendous desert. It peeped up at the stars, a little frightened. The night was very still. There hung an enormous brooding beauty everywhere, a hint of the sinister in it that only the brilliance of the blazing stars relieved. Nothing really slept. Grouped here and there at intervals about this dun-colored world stood the everlasting watchers in solemn, tireless guardianship. The soaring pyramids, the Sphinx, the grim colossi, the empty temples, the long-deserted tombs. The mind was aware of them, stationed like sentries through the night. "This is Egypt. You are actually in Egypt," whispered the silence. 8,000 years of history lie fluttering outside your window. She lies there underground, sleepless, mighty, deathless, not to be trifled with. Beware, or she will change you too. My imagination offered this hint. Egypt is difficult to realize. It remains outside the mind, a fabulous, half-legendary idea. So many enormous elements together refuse to be assimilated. The heart pauses, asking for time and breath. The senses reel a little, and in the end, a mental torpor akin to stupefaction creeps upon the brain. With a sigh, the struggle is abandoned, and the mind surrenders to Egypt on her own terms. Alone, the diggers and archaeologists, confined to definite facts, offer successful resistance. My friend's use of the words resistance and protection became clearer to me. While logic halted, intuition fluttered round this clue to the solution of the influences at work. George Isley realized Egypt more than most, but as she had been. And I recalled its first effect upon myself, and how my mind had been unable to cope with the memory of it afterwards. There had come to its summons a colossal medley, a gigantic colored blur that merely bewildered. Only lesser points lodged comfortably in the heart. I saw a chaotic vision, sands drenched in dazzling light, vast granite aisles, stupendous figures that stared unblinking at the sun, a shining river and a shadowy desert, both endless as the sky, mountainous pyramids and gigantic monoliths, armies of heads, of paws, of faces, all set to a scale of size that was prodigious. The items stunned. The composite effect was too unwieldy to be grasped. Something that blazed with splendor rolled before the eyes, too close to be seen distinctly, at the same time very distant, unrealized. Then, with the passing of the weeks, it slowly stirred to life. It slowly stirred to life. It had attacked unseen. Its grip was quite tremendous, yet it could be neither told, nor painted, nor described. It flamed up unexpectedly, in the foggy London streets, at the club, in the theatre. A sound recalled the street cries of the Arabs. A breath of scented air brought back the heated sand beyond the palm groves. Up rose the huge Egyptian glamour, transforming common things. It had lain buried all this time in deep recesses of the heart that are inaccessible to ordinary daily life. And there hid in it something of uneasiness that was inexplicable. Awe, a hint of cold eternity, a touch of something unchanging and terrific, something sublime, made lovely yet unearthly with shadowy time and distance. The melancholy of the Nile and the grandeur of 100 battered temples dropped some unutterable beauty upon the heart. Up swept the desert air, the luminous pale shadows, the naked desolation that yet brims with sharp vitality. An Arab on his donkey tripped in color across the mind, melting off into tiny perspective, strangely vivid. A string of camels stood in silhouette against the crimson sky. Great winds, great blazing spaces, great solemn nights, great days of golden splendor rose from the pavement or the theatre stall, and London, dim-lit England, the whole of modern life indeed, seemed suddenly reduced to a paltry insignificance that produced an aching longing for the pageantry of those millions of vanished souls. Egypt rolled through the heart for a moment, and was gone. I remembered that some such fantastic experience had been mine. Put it as one may, the fact remains that for certain temperaments, Egypt can rob the present of some thread of interest that was formerly there. The memory became for me an integral part of personality. Something in me yearned for its curious and awful beauty. He who has drunk of the Nile shall return to drink of it again. And if for myself this was possible, what might not happen to a character of George Iseley's type? Some glimmer of comprehension came to me. The ancient, buried, hidden Egypt had cast her net about his soul. Grown shadowy in the present, his life was being transferred into some golden, reconstructed past, where it was real. Some countries give, while others take away, and George Iseley was worth robbing. Disturbed by these singular reflections, I moved away from the open window, closing it. But the closing did not exclude the presence of the third. The biting night air followed me in. I drew the mosquito curtains round the bed, but the light I left still burning. And, lying there, I jotted down upon a scrap of paper this curious impression as best I could, only to find that it escaped easily between the words. Such visionary and spiritual perceptions are too elusive to be trapped in language. Reading it over after an interval of years, it is difficult to recall with what intense meaning, what uncanny emotion, I wrote those faded lines in pencil. Their rhetoric seems cheap, their content much exaggerated. Yet at the time truth burned in every syllable. Egypt, which since time began has suffered robbery with violence at the hands of all the world, now takes her vengeance, choosing her individual prey. Her time has come. Behind the modern mask she lies in wait, intensely active, sure of her hidden power. Prostitute of dead empires, She lies now at peace beneath the same old stars, her loveliness unimpaired, bejewelled with the beaten gold of ages, her breasts uncovered, and her grand limbs flashing in the sun. Her shoulders of alabaster are lifted above the sand drifts. She surveys the little figures of today. She takes her choice. That night I did not dream, but neither did the whole of me lie down in sleep. During the long dark hours, I was aware of that picture endlessly repeating itself, the picture of George Isley stealing out into the moonlight desert. The night so swiftly dropped her hood about him, so mysteriously he merged into the unchanging thing which cloaks the past. It lifted, some huge shadowy hand, gloved softly yet of granite, stretched over the leagues to take him. He disappeared. They say the desert is motionless and has no gestures. That night I saw it moving, hurrying. It went tearing after him. You understand my meaning? No? Well, when excited, it produces this strange impression, and the terrible moment is, when you surrender helplessly, you desire, it shall swallow you. You let it come. George Isley spoke of a web. It is, at any rate, some central power that conceals itself behind the surface glamour folk call the spell of Egypt. Its home is not apparent. It dwells with ancient Egypt, underground. Behind the stillness of hot, windless days, behind the peace of calm, gigantic nights, it lurks, unrealized, monstrous, and irresistible. My mind grasped it as little as the fact that our solar system, with all its retinue of satellites and planets, rushes annually many million miles towards a star in Hercules, while yet that constellation appears no closer than it did 6,000 years ago. But the clue dropped into me. George Isley, with his entire retinue of thought and life and feeling, was being similarly drawn. And I, a minor satellite, had become aware of the horrifying pull. It was magnificent. And I fell asleep on the crest of this enormous wave.